Good afternoon, parish orphans and retrogrades. I hope you're excellent. And guess what? Today I've got a special guest with me, Mr. Bug Hall. You know Bug, he's a convert to Catholicism around 2012. He retired from film after his conversion. He recently moved to Michigan to farm, and we've both been talking, a couple of ex-Californians, how lovely it is to live amid forests, trees. Californians, we don't know what trees are until we get out of the state. Anyway, I'm honored to have him with me today talking about why Catholic social media is the worst desert on earth, even worse than California. Bug, happy to have you with me today, bud.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, no, I'm always liking your, since we're talking about social media, it's funny, I'm always liking your tweets. You do funny, punchy ones, and I thought, why the hell not come on and have a chat?
Awesome.
So what we thought we would do, parish orphans and retrogrades, that would be fun, would be a list show, a little list show for y'all's. Just set up 8 or 9 reasons, I think it's 8 we came up with, that Catholic social media is the worst place you can be on earth, the worst Mordor, barren landscape desert that you can be on earth, with a climate worse than mere aridity. It's a climate of sickness, suffering, and death. And, you know, we thought we'd kick it off now. Would you like to do yours first, Mr. Hall, since you're my guest?
Yeah, sure. Top of my list is demons. I think we sometimes forget that when you're not aiming at heaven, the demons typically leave you alone for the most part, unless they want to get something out of you, right? For the general public. But on a personal level, man, when you're trying to run to win the race, they're after you. And it doesn't take much of a shift in the ratio to get us to hyper focus on something and start nitpicking at it. And I think we all fall for that one. I know I have. There's plenty of times when someone's saying something and all of a sudden I have this desperate need to clarify, right? It's like the contention of just clarification. And the demons can use that to their advantage, right? So I think that's a big one.
Yeah, it's like caveman mode. If the cavemen could stipulate or clarify, you know, Catholic social media, particularly Twitter, is a bunch of Catholics going into caveman mode. And yes, I'm guilty of it too. You're guilty. We've all done it. You've got a hell of a beard, by the way. You've got a caveman beard. And I just wish I could grow one like that. But we've all done it ourselves. We've all been into caveman mode. But it's like higher echelon caveman mode, where you're like, no, this isn't what the syllabus of errors was originally propagated for. Look at what Cardinal Dupenloop said. And then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I want to kick my own ass. Like, this isn't me. I'm also, on the one hand, we're called to be out of the world, but simultaneously we're called to be in the world. And that means we don't want to be these nerd caveman LARPers that go to bats with people that go to blows, I guess.
Yeah.
Go to blows with people that we mostly agree with 90% over minutiae. It's super nerdy. And any of us who weren't, complete dorks would have wanted to beat someone up in middle school or high school for acting that way. So it's actually, schoolyard rules are very instructive under the natural law, and we shouldn't act like that as adults.
Well, I think the demons have a particular knack for, we all have that pride, right? And I know a little bit more than you know about this, right? I know something you don't. And they just turn that pride up just a few notches, and it's just enough to get us to go for the kill, so to speak.
That's
right.
And
then we can't let it go. The attachment to getting that affirmation. Okay, you're right, which is rarely ever going to happen, right? But we want that affirmation so bad. And so it all centers on pride. And if it's pride, there's usually a demon behind that, just bending the ratio a little bit, right? I think that's a big part of it. And then related to that, I think, because I do think argumentation is good and important. I think it's a good thing. And I think we can often forget where the lines there are. I've got some great friends that I think are phenomenal at arguing on Twitter, and I think they do it really well, and they do it the right way at the right time. But ultimately, there is, I guess this is list number 2, right? That's our second part of this list. There, we can get so focused on particular truths within small margins of error, because we do know, as intellectuals, we do know that small errors beget large errors, right? If something is small off in the premise, the conclusion can be wildly off.
Right.
And that truth can lead us to, again, more contention that sometimes is just the wrong place at the wrong time. Now, that kind of a conversation is great over, whiskey and cigars in private. Those kind of hyper detailed minutia discussions, because that's a friendly setting, right? And you can get into the fine details. On Twitter, it's just not the place. Look, if we agree 99.9%, let's just let it go, and let's unite and fight a greater error, right? Fight an error that's like 99.9% off.
Precisely. Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said for the fact that probably, if we're talking demonology, there's a diabolical disorientation that's even on a natural level behind the idea of type a message in 144 characters or whatever it is. I think Lucifer set that up directly, because what people end up doing, if we're talking Twitter, then it's 144 characters. Even if it's Facebook, it's not appropriate to be getting into major stipulations online. It's so pathetic. But what you said, that's truly, the diabolical psychological key here is, I know just a little bit more and I want to show it. It's like, well, again, you do that in person where we have all the bona fides and the warm, ebullient feelings of Dasein, of being there with someone. You have all of the fun of whatever else you're doing. You get into a deep basketball, post-basketball game conversation from one-on-one in your driveway, or you're having whiskey, or you're on a hike or something like that. You don't really care. Whereas if you're on Twitter, I think the psychological turnkey is, you're probably bored and you probably have an ick feeling that you're ignoring your wife and kids and shouldn't be anyway. And so you're kind of like, it stems from ennui. And so you've traded in probably your best judgment for the day, for the afternoon, in order to make this point. So I better win, even though it's minutiae that 6 other people in the world care about.
I want to build on what you just said, because I think it's really key here. You mentioned that icky feeling of, I could be doing something more productive with my time. And so you're already precipitated in this sort of self-loathing. And then you need to counter that by justifying your time or making yourself feel as though you are of value in this moment. My personal experience with that was when I was running a development company. I was playing video games at the time. I don't play video games anymore, and there were times when I would waste an hour or 2 during the middle of the day, right? I could be sending emails. I mean, my work was like 16 hours a day. So I was already away from my family and everything else. And then I would waste an hour or 2 with the excuse of like, well, I just need to unwind a little. Yeah. But what I noticed was the self-loathing of knowing that I was wasting work time, and then that steals the backside of my family time, right? Because then the work just goes an extra hour and a half, 2 hours later. And what I found is that I was shorter with my wife. I was always a little shorter with her, with little things, right?
Right.
And when I started putting those pieces together, and like, how come on these days I'm shorter with her? I realized it's self-loathing. I'm just reflexively kind of heaping that onto her, and again getting very specific with like, well, how come this isn't done? Well, if I would finish work and just have dinner ready, right, whatever the case may be. But it was always about me. It was never really about any real problem.
Precisely. Yeah, that brings us to a number 2, which is already half covered: self-loathing. I said ressentiment. Particularly, there's a public and a private component of this. For American Catholics, we already are absorbed in ressentiment, the French idea. It sounds like it's cognate resentment, right? Where you feel bad about your own position. American Catholics, we're kind of self-loathing anyway, because we're mixed up in this Protestant religious right mixed with secular post-Enlightenment republic, and we're mixed up in this really interesting way. I've written about it in Catholic Republic, but we're kind of the minority. You know, the KKK was refounded against us. We're sort of just want to be part of the mainstream culture, but then the puritanical Catholic strain in us rejects that, rebuffs the notion. So there's this public component of self-loathing, and then like we already talked about from I guess item number one, your excellent opener. There's a private component of self-loathing when it's like, I already know that I've been away from my wife and kids too long, and I shouldn't be doing this. There's something in getting on Catholic social media that's naughty, but it doesn't even have all the immediate vicious pleasures that most naughty pastimes do. It's pretty much the only score you get with it is something negative usually, and it's having 0.001% more knowledge than the other guy. So ressentiment, as the French would say, I think is a real nice number two follow-up point.
And I want to build on that one, because look, we see it with the far left, right? I mean, that's the source, if you will, for the average leftist. That's the source for all the social justice stuff, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if I can promote some social good, and I can virtue signal, I can unwind my own. What's the word you use? What's the French word?
Ressentiment.
Ressentiment. I can unwind my own ressentiment, right? It's that self-loathing, because let's face it, we know that there is plenty for that crowd to have their own self-loathing about. They're ineffectual men for the most part, and there's a deep self-loathing, and then resentment sort of builds, and the whole process comes out in this social justice thing. So we see a mirror image of it. Why can't we apply that to ourselves and realize exactly how we're falling into the same trap?
Yeah, it's like a nuclear arms race of received victimhood, right? And Nietzsche calls this dissimulation. When a weak party that hates its own weakness knows that it can't beat a bigger party, a David that can't beat Goliath, and instead of just lifting weights a la the montage sequence in a Rocky film or something like that, we were talking about that this morning, just says, no, I'm weaker than you, but I'm smarter than you. I'm going to trick you into thinking it's bad. Now, Nietzsche's wrong, because he ascribes that to all of Western morality.
Right.
And he's essentially saying that it's not, morality isn't natural in the Aristotomist way that we understand it. He's wrong there, but where he's right is everywhere else, when it's not necessarily natural morality we're talking about, but just politeness. Why are we so quick as Catholics to dispense with politeness on social media? If it's okay with you, Bug, speaking of politeness, I will just wedge in a quick number 3, and then we'll go like a snake thing, like a snake tournament, where 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. If that's not a breach of politeness itself, because this is related conceptually. No one on Twitter, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. No one ever just says, yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't know. And that stems from the ressentiment and the dissimulation. Like, why does no one ever just admit, okay, our bishops, most of us, aren't teaching us this stuff. I've never heard a sermon or a homiletics on it. And why can't I just admit, like, that's an interesting question. I don't know the answer. And you can even take the emotional honesty one step further. You can say, well, my intuition is still X, but I haven't really fully explored X prime. So I don't know. I'll have to look into that. But that's interesting. People say that over whiskey. They don't say that on Twitter, do they?
Yeah. So that was actually one of the points on my list, was that fear that your position, as Catholics, we have a strong motivation to defend our position, because we're told to, right? We're told that is a good and just thing to do. And when we don't understand something at a level where we can articulate it well, there's a small fear in us, and I think you're right in linking it with a small sense of shame too, as if we're supposed to know all things and be able to be effective apologists for every single position. And I've learned over the last few years, I've learned that that's really not, that shouldn't even be expected of us, right? But because we lack a certain leadership, because we lack a top-down, let's say, thoughtful hierarchy, we feel as though it has to be us. We have to be the one. If I can't do it, who's going to do it? We misapply Saint Mother Teresa's, I'm the only hands that our Lord has here, kind of thing. But we're useless instruments. Like, our Lord doesn't need us. He doesn't need me to know every single detail of every single thing and be able to articulate it in the right manner for each individual person. That's absurd.
Right.
And I think "I don't know" is a really good answer. I don't know. And being able to say I have an instinct. I mean, that's the sense of faith that when we pray much and suffer well, that we tend to have. And it's okay to say, look, I don't know. I don't think it's emotionalism. I think this is a right instinct. I think there's a some kind of clarity in direction here, but I don't know what it is and I can't articulate it.
Yeah, when someone says that, I don't know about you, but I'm just comforted with the solace of emotional and intellectual honesty that has just been assured to me in my interlocutor. It makes it more interesting because it's like a deeper conversational prompt. It's interesting in the same way that it's always interesting when someone says, yeah, let's go look into that and discuss further. Or it's almost like, you're going to go see a movie and then have dinner afterwards with the wife. To me, that was always better than, no. I like having the movie first, dinner afterwards, which I don't often do. But then you can discuss and you can discuss. Yeah, you can like hypothesize. Oh, I think this movie, we kind of did this with Quiet Place too. It's like, oh, I think this is what it'll be. And then you can discuss afterwards. So maybe we just discussed afterwards on the way home in the car because I think we had dinner first. But it's better to do when you're prompted by conversation to like, let's revisit this point later. Both of us are looking at the question in real time and we're not forming, the neurons aren't forming those weird pride generated connections where one like roots in. We all noticed this in law school, right? The first few classes that my class went through together, you kind of go through all the classes together, even in a large law school. In crim law and torts and to some extent property law and contracts, everyone's like, it's not stuff that anyone, even the poli-sci majors who went to law school with swearing big, great things that they're going to do politically, no one really knows what the hell is being talked about in like torts. Right. So you're all just learning together and you're doing this class dialogue and everyone's really open and honest and, oh, I don't know, that's good. And you're really all playing on each other in a way that is foreign in the rest of the American university because everything else has been infiltrated by politics. But then
Which is crazy that should feel foreign to us because that's how we're designed to come to knowledge. We aren't angels, right? We don't start with the knowledge and sort of work down through the abstractions. It's the other way. Right. We need to be able to ask those questions. And like you said, I love when someone says, I don't know. All of a sudden the door's open to just abstract and start kind of figuring it out. That sense of discovery is more unifying. There's a sense of unity when and there's a vulnerability, right? Which as soon as you open the door to discovery and you say, I don't know, you don't know, let's talk about it, let's discuss. There's a vulnerability in discovery, right? You're like an adventurer who might die along the way. And that makes the conversation fun.
Yeah. We sound like a couple of like storybook hour, like, I don't know, preschool teachers or something. Like, this is the adventure of our discussion. But it's true. It's 100% real. And and everyone who's listening understands that the phenomenon we're talking about is absolutely real. And the back half of that story in law school is then you get to constitutional law and everyone's got their received ideological EDA fise They're fixed ideas that they're not going to budge on. And then the conversation gets fake and gay. And like everyone's just rooted into positions. And all of a sudden, the lefties in the room aren't seeing the clear, brutal reason, cutting, incisive reason. And you're like, you were so open-minded in torts or crim law. And we were working together in like the dialectical Western tradition. And all of us were getting smarter and better for it. And now we got to con law, constitutional law, and everyone's just, back to mediocre monologic training for dictators, according to Plato and Aristotle. So it's, there's no room for that on Twitter.
Yeah, all of a sudden the ideologues pipe up in that specific vein where, the will belief is so rooted in the will, right? And being able to will past the things that you're already sort of stuck with is so important. And it's a shame when people lock down and then all of a sudden there's no more conversation, and they don't even know what they're arguing half the time. They just know they have to get to this specific end, right?
Right.
And
right.
That I think in this list so far, that I think is the most unpleasant experience on Twitter. That is sort of the crux. And you know what? I would argue that prompts the personal attacks, right? That prompts the vitriol, because there's a frustration in that. There's a frustration when either you or someone else has locked down in a position that they aren't really articulating well, and they can't see the plain truth in front of them. The confirmation bias has set in, and then you kind of just want to hurt them, right? As a priest friend of mine would say, well, sometimes you just got to take someone behind the woodshed and just slap them around a little to wake them up. You want that to happen. You think maybe if I injure them a little bit, it will lower their pride and open them up, which of course doesn't work. But I think that's where that instinct might come from.
Amen. The final point, since you just reminded me with your priest friend's quotation, is that this does stem from fatherlessness. Most of us don't have a fatherly bishop instructing us patristically in the correct answers. If you have an impasse with a friend intellectually, the last thing you want to go do is involve a lot of parish priests, because they'll just arbitrarily, capriciously take someone's side. Like one of the things that I think it's Solovyov, the Russian Orthodox writer who influenced Dostoevsky, always admitted was weak about orthodoxy and strong about Catholicism, he's like, look, without Papa, the squabbling brothers at the table will never stop squabbling, right? He's got to be able to call them to begin to eat and say, enough squabbling, we're gonna turn to our food now. And that's exactly true. You need a father to say, okay, here's the definitive word, but just leave it be. Or even here's not the definitive word, but let's just leave this aside. None of us have that spiritually, or very few of us, depending on where you live. And
even naturally, right? Even those of us who were fortunate enough to have good father figures in their lives, right? There isn't a hearty intellectualism in fatherhood. If there was a good father, he might have been a sports dad or something like that, right? But we don't have someone that can say, look, there is a time when continuing on this path is completely a waste of time. It's time to set that aside and get back to rebuilding the affections that are necessary for any real discussion to happen.
That's good. I like that a lot. Yeah. So do you have a number 4 and 5, bud?
Yeah. So number 4 for me, and I think this is general across the board. It's just simply anonymity, right? The reality is, even though my name is on my Twitter, and this isn't an argument for, I know there's a big debate right now between like Twitter anons and people who are brave enough to put their face on there. The reality is there's always an anonymity, right? I don't really know the person on the other end of this. I have no affection for them. I'm never going to meet them in person. So even if they know my name and I know their name, that means nothing, right? Yeah. We're still just as anonymous as who's some of my favorite Twitter guys, Grover, right?
He says hi, by the way. He told me.
He told me to shout out shout out to him on here, but I was like, he'd come on here all the time.
He's telling us each privately to say hello to the other one. It's such a Grover thing to do.
Oh, Grover.
Or Guido, one of these guys. Like, I love these guys. I think they're great guys, and I think there's a reason that they need to keep their anonymity. They're no more anonymous than the rest of us, right? Like, I think it's a total farce to think that there's any real accountability online at all. Yeah, you can get doxxed and whatever, but I mean personal accountability within the spectrum of the affections that you should have for the other person. These strangers online I'm not going to lose any affection with them. I don't know them. I have no affection for them. That's where I have to stop myself constantly. I try to, and this isn't the holier than thou, be like me kind of message, but I try to, the second a contention comes up, I try to imagine the person on the other end. I try to formulate a right affection for them, right?
Yeah.
And so I started doing this thing a couple months ago, and it's been really helpful for me. I've started private messaging people. I'll say like, hey, my DMs are open. Message me privately, and then I'll set up a Skype session with them.
Yeah.
I got time, you know what I mean? So I'll say, hey, look, why don't we jump on a 15-minute Skype call? Let's see each other face to face and let's talk about this.
Yeah.
And I'll ask them questions about their life and whatever. The conversation becomes drastically different.
Totally.
Right? I've had conversations with people about unnatural attractions that cry to heaven for justice. People who have those affections, and they say, let's have a conversation about it. We get on Skype. All of a sudden, they're teary-eyed. They realize that I'm not out to hurt them in any way, and we're kind of friends, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to have them over to my house for dinner because I have a family and whatnot. But there's suddenly some kind of affection there, and the conversation goes wildly different.
Absolutely, and I've done the same thing on DMs for a while. It's like a 99% success rate. I can attest to that. The only person I think that it's ever not worked with is Jay Dyer, so that barely even counts. But I'm just joking, people. It almost always goes better when you just repersonalize the person. Even in like the 90s crime movies, there were a lot of like kidnap and rape movies in the 90s. It seems like there are less now, but they would say like, maybe it's Cold Case Files. They say, if you're ever kidnapped, like say your name. Here's my name. This is the city I was born in, because I don't think this works very well, but you try anything at that point. They've depersonalized you to the point that you're like a stone. You're a tabula rasa to them, the murderer. And they kind of have to do it because there's still a person in there somewhere in them, and persons relate to persons. So, hey, his name is Robert Paulson, right? Like the famous scene from Fight Club. And, that's kind of a fetishized version of that, but it's really true. Now, here's the one thing. It's at least a sliding scale bug of anonymity, right? Because the very desideratum, the benefit gained by the anons on social media, which again, I'm friends with a lot of these people too, like Grover. So I don't have the problem with it that some of my friends like Patrick Coffin, he can't stand the anons. He's famous, he calls them fake name cowards. But it's like there's definitely a desideratum that's incentivizing them to do this, and it's usually a fiscal one because they don't want to get doxxed at their job or whatever it is. I agree with you that it's a sliding scale. The same anonymity exists when we consider anonymity a simple lack of culpability and accountability, even if someone uses their name, because it's like you're not going to have to fight if you say fighting words because you're across the country. But it's a sliding scale, isn't it? I mean, anons have more anonymity, don't they?
Yeah, sure. That there is absolutely truth to that, and I think I mean it on a more micro level. I'm self-canceled anyway. I very specifically, very intentionally self-canceled, so I don't have anything to fear. I'm homesteading.
Right.
And I would argue that if every single person in the world, which is of course not going to happen, but if every single person in the world made the decision at the exact same time to face the consequences of doxing and just got rid of all anonymous accounts, I think the problem would get solved overnight, right? Because you can't fight everybody. But at the same time, these people, there's a reality to their fears. And I know people who have been doxxed and lost careers with unwillingly, right, who weren't ready for it. And that's a terrifying thing, man. But they also do have the benefit of being able to go a little further. I had an anonymous account right before I made my self-canceling video. And I definitely used it in a way that I wouldn't use it if I had my name on it. That's absolutely true. And I recognize that at a certain point. In fact, I think I got 4 accounts suspended in a matter of like a month. So yeah, that's true. It's true.
It's heightened diplomatic immunity, but
yeah,
there's definitely diplomatic immunity even if you use your face. I mean, even people that have more like a recognizable face, like you, right, or I guess me, it's like, I mean, I still don't really care, you know. I mean, because again, like, I'm basically a homesteader myself, minus the farming. I can do kind of what I want to do. So, you know, if I'm in a grumpy
from
mood,
the same place, I can just tell, you know, just from how you handle yourself on Twitter and the few things I've watched with you, we both come from a place where reality is facing somebody in fisticuffs, right? Like, you know, I grew up in a place where nobody really cares about status or money or careers. They're all pretty low class, if you will, people who a consequence is having to fight somebody for what you've said or done, right? A consequence is almost always a physical altercation. So I think in those terms, and I think at least animalistically, we all really think in those terms. I think that's the most basic instinct for us. And we all know that nobody's going to show up at our house and challenge us to a duel, right? Like deep down, that's the anonymity that I'm referring to.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually the one psychologically that matters most. I think that's the one that we all operate under without even realizing it.
Agreed. That's again, very well said. So I think you're up now for number 5 to boot. Kicker.
I think that was it for me, man. I think we touched on one of those.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, one of yours was nearly identical to mine. So we'll skip repetition.
Okay. Well, number 5. Yeah. Cause we're kind of repeating some of each other's and we had some overlappage there. I'll say this this is not a phenomenon that only exists in the human world on social media. It's a phenomenon, as we all can think back to middle school and high school, where it's on full display. There are two-faced people. So number 5 would be, look, all of us, I think this kicks off what you said in number 4 really well. Twitter and other social media play upon and aggrandize bad tendencies that are already there in human nature, and they're soft-wired into the media themselves, particularly Twitter, to feel anonymous and to be like, say something really mean that you wouldn't say if the person were right in your face. But then there's a whole new dimension to it, which is just some people are genuinely two-faced. And those people tend to be drawn to social media more than other people. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone that uses social media is a two-faced person, but there's a lot of like, you say the worst thing in the world and then you turn around, and probably a lot of us, we're all getting off Twitter with our guns blazing. And the ones that say particularly nasty things, they're doing what I'm doing. They're like, oh, honey, what's for dinner? Is that chicken I smell cooking? Yeah. You know, it's like, dude, you just threw down the gauntlet. What ought to be, it's legally codified as fighting words. A lot of people are saying things that would count under SCOTUS's jurisdiction as fighting words. And then they're like, that smells like thyme and rosemary. It's like, how'd you season the chicken, honey? It's like you put down your phone. It's not even like you have to walk into the next room. You're right there. Half the time I'll tweet when my wife is cooking dinner. I don't have any time during the school year, but literally it's been a vicious practice since the summer's kicked off. It's like I'll literally be kind of just tweeting on a bar stool at our little bar while my wife is cooking dinner, and I'll put down the phone and be like, it smells like chicken. and so it's funny because if you're in a particular, I generally don't say really, really nasty things, but I've been drawn into squabbles. And you know, you put it down, then it's like you pick up your kid, you get back to real life, what you ought to be doing, paying more attention to your wife and kids, which is what we all need to do, which is what, you know, the so-called greatest generation, they created a bunch of hippie boomers by not paying enough attention to them. Like, you gotta love your kids, and that's a full-time job. I kind of just think, if I didn't have to promote like shows, that's really all I use Twitter for good. I would just get rid of it. That's the main thing. I just like to be able to say, hey, I have a show now.
We're on track to get rid of our smartphones within the next few years. Eventually, we have a timeline for simplification of our life, and smartphones are on a hard list for getting rid of. Look, at the end of the day, and I agree with your point. I think the two-faced people out there can also look, when there's a real fight to be had in a situation where there's an actual injustice, it brings out both the best and the worst, right? Because there's a real sense of camaraderie, I think, amongst people too. I know that I am often at my worst when I'm defending somebody else, right?
Yeah.
I will suddenly escalate things in a way that I typically wouldn't with myself. So I think that's part of it too. Like you come after my boys, and I'm gonna get nasty a lot quicker.
Yeah, because it brings out the SJW in us. It's like, that's all SJWs do, except they're doing it as an abstraction. They're like, oh, I'm offended on behalf of all black people. And it's like, give me a break. No one's offended on behalf of people they never met. At least us. Yeah, it brings out our SJW, and it's like, no, these are my boys. I really care about them. But it's like, go take a nap or go, you know, bake something to calm down. Like, your boys will be okay. And I tell myself this all the time. The boys will be okay. It's Twitter, like sticks and stones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think that is absolutely the case. So it's a double-sided coin, right? Two-faced people.
Right.
Is that there is an injustice there that you do feel like you have to fight. And then once it's leveled at someone, you know, I see people picked on all the time, and you know, when I don't mean picked on in a I don't want to use a word I can't use on streams, but, you know, in a effeminate way. But you know, you want to defend those people. You want to get in there and say, hey, shut your mouth. I know for a fact this is a good man who's a great father, and you don't know what you're talking about. That instinct comes up for sure. I thought of another one for the list, by the way. This is my bonus one. The bonus one is this.
Cool.
I think a lot of the nastiness and contention on Catholic Twitter isn't even real. Okay. And what I mean by that is, sometimes, especially in our very effeminized culture, sometimes people just say things in a straightforward, blunt way with no malice whatsoever, with no personalization of it. And it's read wildly wrong, right? So like I think the worst one, I lost like 200 followers. Well, when I released my video, I lost over 10,000 followers in a month. But the biggest loss since then was I released a tweet that simply said, double income addiction is a plague on our society, something like that. Yeah,
I remember.
That was read as a direct attack at every single person who was in some way cooperating with that system of double income. When I tweeted it, it came from a really positive. I remember my state at the time. It was a very positive, helpful. You know, we can all fall prey to this. Here's a good that anyone's able to embrace if you want. It was a pure intention, right?
Right.
And by the way, I stand by it as an objective good as well, to have tweeted it. There was absolutely nothing wrong or contentious about it whatsoever. I think a lot of the contention, or at least perceived contention on Twitter, is simply soft people who see plain statements as personal attacks.
Yeah. And that, I mean, people go by the case for Patriarchy, which is available for pre-order now. It's literally magisterially vouchsafed. I mean, from the book of Sirach in the Old Testament, you're not allowed to have two incomes. All of the Pauline epistles, from Timothy to Titus to Colossians to 1 Corinthians to Ephesians, not allowed to have two incomes. the patristics who talk about it, both East and West patristics, not allowed to have two incomes. Then the Thomistic tradition of, you know, the Council of Trent Catechism makes it specific, as do even I think 5 or 6 20th century popes talk about the two income trap, and you know, that's Elizabeth Warren's term for it. But it's 100% pure Catholic teaching that the fathers, the bishops and priests, have just stood down on. So it falls to laymen like you and me to say it. And it's, that didn't, I remember that tweet, didn't sound nasty at all. People are just defensive. And that's why it's a separate line item in our little list here. That's why it's number 6. People's defensivity to plain, unfestooned truths. I like it. I like it.
Intellectual effeminacy, right? I mean, ultimately, man, and I fall prey to this as well. When something that we are doing is challenged, right? Which this is a distinction from something we believe. Something that we do in our daily life, when that's challenged, man, it can really shatter our emotional state. And we all understand how attachments work. We understand that, you know, the ratio is altered by our attachment to a particular object or a perceived good. And I think that's a huge part of the problem. And I think that immediately turns their vitriol on, and they're on the attack now, right? Because they need the injury to stop. And that I think is a huge part of the problem. I would argue, now that I've said that out loud, I would argue that might be the biggest one.
Yeah, that could well be number 1 if these were ranked ordinally. On the other hand, I will say this, and I'm being 100% honest. And everyone who knows me knows this is honest. When someone gets a good zinger in on Twitter about me or what I do or what I think, I genuinely enjoy it. Like
I think Anthony Stein one time said something about, like, what are they going to come out with, the Vigano sweatpants or whatever? And we shared that with everybody.
I remember that one.
Because that was before it was a trope. He might have been the first one to say that, and we were laughing. But like, if you, I mean, genuinely, I think I'm a good barometer, a human barometer for it, because if you insult me on Twitter and it's genuinely a good diss, you diss me on wax, as the gangster rappers used to say.
No, that was our first interaction, and that's how I am too, by the way. Like, I love a good, look, men in general need to be able to insult each other. It's what we do, right?
It is.
And the reason we do it is because we need to test the effeminacy level of our counterparts.
Right.
If you're poked and you fall apart, you're effeminate, which means I can't rely on you. There's a completely natural reason for why men razz each other.
Right. There's a teleology.
I've worked on like, corporate farms, production farms before. And dude, it's vicious. But if you take it in stride, if you join in and, you cut back and then you add a little self-deprecating humor in there as well, you play that dance really well, you become like brothers, because everyone knows they can rely on each other. Everyone knows if the combine pulls someone's arm in, no one's going to fall apart and panic. They're going to get to work and solve the problem. And the guys that don't, man, they're out of there quick. They quit in a week. Right. And I think that's a huge part of it, because we've become an effeminized culture. People can't take that. So that was the first interaction I had with you. Actually, someone made a fake account for you, I think, and they used that fat app to make you fat in your.
Those were delightful. Yeah.
Oh, it was great. And I said something about why wasn't this titled, or why wasn't this fake Twitter called Tim Gordo? And I was kind of expecting, because I didn't know you, I was kind of expecting maybe you to wince at it. And dude, you jumped right in. And that moment, I was like, I like this guy. He's cool. Yeah,
it's a real thing. Guys need to, I like what you said. You need the trial by fire. You need the weather testing. And if a guy can't laugh at himself, like that's a red flag, not a yellow flag. I had an extended discussion about this with Milo, recently on text. And I'm like, the way to go is to, the guys I like the most in this world is I say nothing but negative to them to their face, right? But then behind their backs, I just like positive, like that guy's amazing. That guy's solid gold. Now, this is what I was telling Milo. I was like, with the straight ethos is negative to the face and very positive behind the back if you like the person. What I had to stipulate with Milo is if it's negative to the face and then negative behind the back, that just means you don't like the person. And that can, with the you know, the admirable, awesome lifestyle transformation that he's making, I felt I needed to stipulate that, because I was like, we're friends. Like, don't talk about, you know, like diss me to my face and then say nice things about me behind my back. Because I was getting pictures of
is 180 degrees antithetical to masculinity, right? And when I converted 8 years ago, that was the first thing I realized. I was so angry for 6 months, man, because I had been taught 180-degree difference growing up in Hollywood. Now, not my original life in Texas, but growing up in Hollywood, 180-degree difference from true masculinity. Yeah. And it's interesting that you flip that on its head, right? Because the masculine man will razz you all day, and you'll never hear a positive thing from him. But when you come up to someone else, he's only got good things to say about you, right?
Right.
I know that I kind of aim for that. And then I think there's also that little add mix of being willing to self-deprecate as well occasionally, to let them know that's kind of a way of opening the door, right? Like, right. Because there's also a strange hierarchical thing that happens to us, I think, psychologically, where the one person that's not getting made fun of, people start to wonder, do they have some authority that I don't know about? Are they off limits for some reason? What's the situation here? So opening that door by adding the self-deprecating humor is important as well.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It's just gay for guys who are hanging out with each other to say any positive things, which is why it's flitty. Like, I say negative things about myself. You say negative things about me. You say negative things about yourself. I'll say negative things about you, and round we go. There's a beauty to it, you know. But if one guy is like, I'm the best, you guys are losers, it's like, well, this isn't fun anymore. You're just an insecure prick, you know, like that. What good is this? We're supposed to just be having fun saying horrible things about everything.
That person will likely get the brunt of the real vitriol that can start to form in those environments. It's like a feeding frenzy when you get someone like that in the group. And next thing you know, man, they're at the bottom of the totem pole, and they're done. Right.
Yeah, I know some like that. Well, so, all right, I guess number 7, we'll go on with the 7ness, the completion of the list. And these have dovetailed really well. When we do these, you make some line items, I make some line item lists. They always dovetail well. There's it's the spirit that moves us. Number 7 would be, there's a distinction to be made between people who, I don't know what the number is, 90%, 85, 80, 20, who counts as one of us. And I know all human beings do, blah, 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 but there are real enemies out there. What's the numerical line in the sand for where we have to line up? I don't know exactly what it is. I couldn't quantify it perfectly, but you know, at some level, one has to be like, hey, 80-20 or something. If this guy's good, a good, faithful Catholic, or, you know, we all have Protestant friends, you know, even just a good, faithful Christian, then he's one of us. To diss him in a serious way in front of other people, i.e. social media, would be fragging him. Fragmentation grenade, would people point out, we talk about in Rules for Retrogrades. It's one of the rules. But then some people take it too far. And anytime you're talking about an unfaithful Catholic, I was having people whining about the fact that I take after James Martin S.J. And it's like, well, no, that's not fragging. He's on the opposite side. So some people were mistaking what that means.
He's a great example of the source of the problem. The source of the problem is, for the first time in Catholic history, we don't know who is us and who is them. I think that there were at all times in Catholic history, that would have been an easy thing to parse out. There were times when it was the hierarchy that was them. We're not in a new place, all right? But the teaching of the church was always clear. So the faithful could very easily be us, and look at the hierarchy, look at the Borgias popes or whoever, and say that's definitely them. And then look to the world outside, right? The Mohammedans.
Right.
And be able to say that that's them. Right now, man, because the teaching of the church has been so obfuscated for so long, we don't know who's us and who's them. We don't, and like just now you were trying to put a percentage on it. Is it 80, 20? You know, how much modernism can I have before I'm a them? Right. And we're all entrenched in it, man. It's in the air we breathe. Like, and I have to remind myself of that constantly. Like, I'm constantly sifting through my own garbage, trying to find my own errors. And man, when you do that, I think the percentage starts to at least clarify for you, because you realize that your own percentage isn't all that great either. And it makes it a little easier to recognize who is us and who is them. But man, we're in troubled times, and not to be a doomer, but I think because we are in a particularly troubled time, that distinction of like, no, if they're not 99.9%, I don't want anything to do with them. They're the them. I think that's easier to come to.
Yeah, there's no institutional doctrinal shore up. There is no Grand Inquisitor anymore, right? We've renamed who used to be called the Curial Grand Inquisitor, the Segnatura. It's actually the position Cardinal Burke used to hold before he was demoted. Right. was the ex-Grand Inquisitor, which is dope. If I had that position, I would want to rename it, at least as long as I held the tenure. But we don't really have that anymore. As I was
able to burn people at the stake, then I would take that position.
yeah, that's the point. Is when the church is doing that, they are shoring up their own, doctrinal backyard. Again, when Papa is doing that, or representatives of Papa, the brothers don't feel like they have to do it. We do it now, and it's an arbitrary number, and it fuels needless, squalid kinds of confrontation, needless squabbling. Yeah. But it is what it is, and it is a mark of the time. It's the sign of the times. I agree.
I think one thing that helps there, and this is just something that I try to do, and look, I fail. Every principle that I think I've ever recognized are things that I fail in constantly. So when I put forth principles or things like that, it's me calling myself out more than anyone else. One thing I try to do is I try to distinguish specific details from the total, right? So like somebody might have a specific thing that they have an insane amount of vitriol over, and they will not let it go. But they're 95% Catholic otherwise, right? And maybe they're loud about this one thing, and I think they're absolutely wrong. And they're so loud that it can blind you from recognizing that, hey, look, man, they're Catholic otherwise. And I think that's part of the key, is to step back and say, this is one thing. This is one issue. And I know our Lord is perfectly simple, and all issues, resonate into infinity, right, at a certain level. But for the most part, we got to start looking at each individual thing and saying, that's one thing, right? The tribe wars over which parish you attend and who's partially listed or not, like, that's one thing. And at the end of the day, if that's the one thing, man, we're on the same team. Like, let's be that gift where the arms are grabbing each other. What is that, from Over the Top or something?
Right. Yeah. Over the Top. Turn your hat backwards and arm wrestle. Arm wrestle with brotherly love in your heart. No, I like it very much, Bug Hall. And look, I'm really excited that you're out of California, because I'm out of California too. I always give a shout to realestateforlife.com, because they help good people like you and me get from the bluest of the blue to the reddest of the red. I didn't use Real Estate for Life, and I could have. It would have made my life easier. So I'm genuinely glad you're in Michigan, farming, living amongst beautiful trees. I also need to give a quick plug to the book. People, it's on pre-order now. Go buy it at Sophia Institute, The Case for Patriarchy. You can also buy it at Amazon, though they don't want me to tell you that. Also, do like, subscribe, hit the bell. And also, if you want to support this show, find me on patreon.com. Did you have a parting shot, Bug? I've really enjoyed having you on.
Yeah, man. I want to. You asked me earlier about promoting anything, and it just hit me. The Chaplet of Our Lady of Sorrows. Get on it, man. Anyone listening to this, just try for a month. Do it every day for a month. Ask Our Lady to reveal your hidden faults, reveal your blind spots, and man, it'll be a boost.
Okay. Is there any it's a special devotion. Is there any special prayer that goes off along with that?
No, if you just do the chaplet, do it for the intention of her revealing your blind spots or your hidden faults. I think it's the most powerful devotion for that purpose. It really is.
Okay.
So you just look up the Chaplet of Our Lady of Sorrows, and you can do it on your fingers, if you need to, or get a chaplet.
Cool. I'm gonna try that because I've been hearing that more and more. Chaplet of Our Lady of Sorrows. Sounds awesome. And I've really enjoyed talking to you. And we agree on so much. Bug Hall, great having you on, and I'll have you back on.
Awesome, man. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you having me. This has been really fun.
Yes, it has. God bless you, people. Remember, we're called to live in the world, but not of the world, which means you're allowed to have a little fun. Do it. God bless you.